video cameras watching our every move is a pretty common trope in dystopias. In fact, it isn't uncommon to be watched by cameras in our daily lives. I'd wager it's less the camera that is the issue, but the question of who is watching and their motives. I'm Urban Banshee, and today I'll be talking about Scored by Lauren McLaughlin. There will be spoilers ahead, and fair warning, I found this book meh at best. Scored sets up a world where a company has cameras everywhere and uses their surveillance to grade teenagers on how worthwhile they are as people. There are possible cover-ups, misuse of the score, and so many questions about what it would mean to live in such a world. Only to say, screw you, this book isn't going to answer any of that stuff, nerd. The boy and girl kiss. The end. That isn't an exaggeration. The story literally ends after the main couple kiss, ignoring the huge mess they created. Our main character is Imani, who starts the story scored at a 92. Which is known as a high B, and as a perk, she has a special cuff that works both as a status symbol and a cell phone. She meets up after school with her best friend Katie, who is currently scored at 71. They made a pact back in middle school when they were both 90s to stay friends no matter what their scores became. Though they do avoid each other at school, since it is just common sense to only associate with your own score group. They go on Imani's boat to check her lobster traps and chat. Katie's mom is pushing her to go to college, especially since she couldn't go and is just an untrained artist. In the past, there had been a second depression which wiped out universities, causing higher education to become accessible only for the rich. Score Corp is now the only way to get a chance of a higher education, since they will pay your tuition if you score high enough. Which on paper sounds good, but I'll get into that later. Imani warns Katie about hanging out with unscored kids, since unscored are basically zeros, or invisible, and that they might be the reason Katie's score keeps dropping. When you graduate high school, your score becomes final, though it seems being scored is currently optional. Rich kids don't really bother with the score since they can just buy an education outright. Though there are rumors that soon scores won't be optional. Everyone's score is updated on the first Tuesday of each month. The kids in the 90s agree to ignore each other on that day until they can verify that they are still in the 90s, just to make sure they don't accidentally interact with someone with a lower score. Electronics are automatically deactivated on school grounds, apparently to combat cheating and distractions. The computers in the school library have internet access. Not sure how that would work, or the logistics of not having phone or internet service for a whole day. Midway through the day, the new scores hadn't been posted yet, so we follow Imani along with her normal school day. The only class of note is Mr. Carroll's history class. Mr. Carroll is known as a creeper, someone who is worried about the creep of surveillance and scoring into all areas of society. Not what the word creep usually means. Despite being so heavily anti-score, Mr. Carroll has been fired due to having tenure. Usually only unscored students get him as a teacher, but apparently there were layoffs the previous year, and they were short a history teacher. Imani and two other scored kids get stuck in his class, Clarissa, current score 74, and Logan at 93. There are 4 unscored kids as well in the class. Most kids end up unscored because their parents didn't sign the consent forms. And by senior year, nearly all unscored kids drop out. As far as everyone is concerned, being unscored is like not turning in an assignment. You might not technically get a 0, but as far as your overall grade is concerned, it might as well be. Mr. Carroll keeps the desks in a circle to encourage free-spirited debate. But the reality is the scored end up on one side and the unscored on the other. And they slowly inch their desks away from the other side until Mr. Carroll notices and pushes them back together. He likes to call his class a score-neutral zone, air quotes and all. At this point, I'm already getting hung up on the details. It's common knowledge that interacting with kids in a lower zone can affect your score, and it's even worse if they aren't unscored. Can a teacher really force a student to jeopardize that? Today, Mr. Carroll talks about a scholarship that is for public school students and is for $40,000 and will be awarded based on an essay. Clarissa is excited since she is below the threshold for a scholarship from Score Corp. So Mr. Carroll says the final for his class will be an essay for the scholarship. For the subject, he assigns the score kids to write an essay opposing the score, and the opposite for the unscored. Clarissa argues that forcing them to write anti-score stuff would damage their score. Imani also agrees, but one of the unscored kids named Diego interrupts her saying it wouldn't, and that most scored are completely ignorant of their own system. When the scores are posted, Imani decides to not look herself up and just have her fellow 90s tell her. Kids are rearranging themselves into new groups, and when she makes it to her group, they all ignore her. So she rushes to find out her new score, and it is 64. That is an insane drop. Nearly 30 full points. Katie comes over to Imani apologizing to her, saying she thought if Imani didn't know anything, her score wouldn't be affected. Oh, and Katie's score has fallen even further than Imani's. Katie is now scored at a 27. That's over 40 points. To put this into perspective, the scores are basically the same as grading in American schools. 90s and up is an A, 80s B, 70s a C, and anything below 70, you're basically failing, no one will hire you, and your life is over. The reason for the sudden drop in points? Turns out Katie is actually in love with an unscored boy and had been secretly dating him. Imani goes to sit with the group of 60s who are all bad-mouthing Katie for whoring herself out, and has become a cautionary tale for avoiding the unscored. Which, if that is the reason the scores fell so low, then Imani has every reason to be against her teacher in Mr. Carroll's class, since he forces the scored in his class to interact with the unscored. When Imani gets home after school, she finds Katie at her house. Turns out her parents kicked her out, and when Imani doesn't offer her a place to stay, Katie says she has a backup plan, and she will go live with the parents of her boyfriend. The next morning, Imani's younger brother, scored at 85, ignores her and tells her not to talk to him, and that if she doesn't want her score to fall even lower, to not talk to Katie anymore, outright calling her a slut. The book is more making it about the fact Katie is with an unscored boy that makes her a slut. But come on, Imani doesn't even argue with the term. Imani goes to research ScoreCorp during lunch at the library, seeing if there's a way to raise her score or something. Apparently, ScoreCorp doesn't reveal any information about its scoring algorithm. What is the point? How can you have a system that grades people with invisible guidelines? Scientists have figured out that there are 5 key elements of fitness that the score is based on through reverse engineering. Reverse engineering what? Literally, no one has the data. It's just guessing. It's been documented that scores can drop rapidly, but they cannot rise in the same manner, which already points to a flawed system. Once you drop below a certain level, there's no point in trying anymore. If it's possible to fall 40 points in a single month, but you can maybe raise 3 to 4 points in that same time span, then it would take you a full year to regain your old spot, if you had a steady rise. Talk about having the odds stacked against you. At least pretend your system is fair. Being persistent and certain she is better than anyone else who has had a sudden drop in score, Imani goes to see her principal in hopes of finding advice to raise her score back to its original place in just a few months. Oh yeah, Imani is a senior. This is her last year in high school, so she has a very limited time to try and fix this. The principal is Ms. Wheeler, a high-B herself that graduated with a score of 98. Ms. Wheeler talks about how the score knows us better than we know ourselves, and how loyalty is a trap and a disempowering bond that doesn't offer any benefits. Ms. Wheeler tells her she is sympathetic, but since Imani is no longer a 90, she needs to face reality and look at what her options are now. Which basically boiled down to, if she can raise her score a single point, she can join the military. Not much else. The next day, Diego slips her a note that proposes they help each other with the scholarship essay. While still considering Diego's note, during study hall, Imani ends up talking with Mr. Carroll. He mentions that writing the paper won't affect her score, and Imani says she knows. But does she? There is no proof that bad-mouthing the score isn't score negative, even if it is a school assignment. But whatever, this is just an excuse, so the book can drop that point and continue where it wants to go. She asks about collaborating with an unscored, and Mr. Carroll tells her he can't force her to do such a thing because it would get him fired. Instead, he just tells her some places that are free of cameras. Again highlighting that the idea that mingling with an unscored will lower her score, and that Mr. Carroll knows that this is true. She goes to the public library that only has one camera watching people go in and out, but is safe inside. Diego is inside waiting for her, in the back leaning against the doorframe of the fire exit, which he has propped open. Sorry, but why isn't the fire alarm going off then? It's a useless detail, but it just highlights some of the issues I have with this book. the minor details that make no sense or actively destroy the believability of this world. Oh, and he is reading a paper book. And not just any old book, but 1984. Having a character mention or read 1984 in a dystopian book happens way too often. We get it, it's the first real dystopian novel, and oh, they live in a dystopian society. Do you get it? Diego mentions that Imani must really want the scholarship if she's willing to show up for an unscored. He tells her she has a reputation for self-destruction, to which she retorts she doesn't have a reputation, she has a score. His attitude pisses her off, and she starts to storm out when he hands her a piece of paper. The paper has a list of questions on it, and Diego tells her if he likes what she writes, he will be in touch. He is the one who called her out, and yet he is the one setting up barriers for her to prove her worth to him. Imani weighs the pros and cons of working with Diego and frets over if the camera can just tell that she is thinking of working with an unscored, even if they never saw them together. In the end, she decides she will do whatever it takes to get to college. Her end goal is to become a marine biologist and find out why there aren't as many clams in the water, and maybe even solve the problem. Though she is upset that she can't just take over the family clam digger business. Diego ends up satisfied enough with her answers to his test and slips a note to her saying to meet him later. Oh, and it turns out that all video footage from the ScoreCorp cameras is not only owned by ScoreCorp, but they never turn over their footage to anybody for any reason. Not even if there's a murder. Maybe. The book kind of waffles a little on this point, and since Imani is the POV character, if she doesn't care or find out something, we the audience never get to know either. But that is just so weird to me. What is the point of constant surveillance then? Don't get me wrong, I don't want to be constantly watched or to have just anybody be able to watch footage of me, but to have cameras nearly everywhere that only grade school kids and do nothing else seems all kinds of pointless to me. Imani goes along a back way that doesn't have working cameras to meet Diego. Some thugs she comes across jeer at her and ask for sexual favors. She thinks to herself that the score will fix people like that by giving them what they deserve. But what is left but crime if you take away all ability to make money legally? And what do they deserve? The score just labels people. It doesn't do much else. I get that this is a legit mindset people have, but the book never makes a point to disprove her prejudices, or even frame them like she is wrong. Imani finally makes it to where Diego is, and chickens out. She runs off, but Diego chases after her, demanding to know why she is leaving. She tells him to move, and she just changed her mind. Diego does move, but not without telling her she will never win that scholarship, because literally all he does is egg her on. The next day after school, Imani decides to talk to Miss Wheeler again, hoping that she will be able to help her. Imani explains Diego's suggestion that they collaborate on the essay. Ms. Wheeler tells her that Diego is a troublemaker, and asks if she wants to make an official complaint about Diego. Imani doesn't really want to get Diego in trouble, and says she thinks she might have a chance at winning the scholarship. Of course, Imani thinks that. It's only her main character status that makes it possible, though. Ms. Wheeler informs Imani that the reason Diego is so smart when it comes to anti-score points is because his mom is a lawyer, and in fact is the same lawyer who sued the school several times already. She is the reason why teachers had to be laid off. The school lost money paying for the lawsuits. Diego's mom is old money, and so she can afford to keep filing lawsuits over and over. It's not clear if the school lost or what all the lawsuits were for, just that it cost the school money. That's when it clicks for Imani why Diego is so different from all the other unscored. He doesn't need a score. He has money and connections. Miss Wheeler goes on about how people like him and his mother have no respect for the system, that they can't understand how it can give people with nothing a chance. Diego, in fact, is a spy sent by his mom so she can find more ammo for suing the school. Imani is probably just a case study for his mom, since she is a fast point dropper. This idea is very upsetting to Imani, so she suggests she in turn spy on Diego. Being caught with an unscored could ruin her score even more, and she would be screwed if taking the chance didn't get her the scholarship. Ms. Wheeler suggests confessing directly to a camera, so it won't dock her for being with Diego, since she would be working for the score's benefit. Imani later finds a camera to confess to. They don't have audio, but they do have lip-reading software. She passes a note to Diego and takes him out on her boat to an island. Diego is condescending to her, telling her she uses doublespeak in her answers about the score. And oh, isn't it convenient that they live in an Orwellian nightmare, but they removed 1984 from the school curriculum? It used to be required reading. Maybe in the author's class. I didn't read it in school. Your experiences aren't universal. There's a long list of books that I've heard be called required reading, but just weren't in any of my classes. Not everyone has read the books that I was required either. Diego asks her if she even knows the history of ScoreCorp, to which he asks if he actually wants her to answer or if he just likes talking to himself, because she can just go get her clam fork. He laughs at her and says, "What are you, a clam digger?" He shuts up for a moment when he realizes she is. I tried looking it up, and as far as I can tell, clam digger isn't a derogatory term. So I guess it'd be similar to someone saying, "What are you, a cashier?" Where it's more that it's low-paid work. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. Out of all the jobs I've heard be used as an insult, clam digger wasn't one of them. We get the backstory of the score. The inventor of the score was a woman named Sherry Potter and her husband Nathan Klein. But apparently Sherry discredited everything Nathan and her did in an interview that has never aired. And she then disappeared. Diego suggests Imani write a report on that. He then insults her handwriting, and Imani says she prefers typing because otherwise her writing can't keep up with her thoughts. There is no real reason for Diego to belittle Imani and act so aloft all the time. Imani gets frustrated with him and says maybe she should write the essay about his mom. He gives her a hostile look for a moment, then relaxes and says whatever, but that she should still look into Sherry. Imani doesn't believe in the conspiracy, though she does research it thoroughly just in case. And she finds bubkiss. Lots of dead ends, and the closest thing she finds to actually being something is a video of someone saying they heard the recording of the interview. But before that person can repeat anything that was said, the room they are in is broken into and they are yanked away off screen. Reminds me of those creepypastas that are from the first person perspective, but still end with them dying. Who uploaded this video then? Imani abandons that line of research and just ends up researching the genius couple. In an interview, they say poverty is a failure of technology, that the internet just widened the gap between the rich and poor. Poverty is not merely a question of resources, it's also a collection of behaviors. They quickly say it's not that they want to victim blame, since structural economic issues certainly have their role. The short of it, they're trying to say being poor creates behavioral patterns that keep those people poor. True, but also misleading. They claim the score's purpose is to interrupt those behaviors and patterns. If you give someone $1 million suddenly, but they had lived paycheck to paycheck their entire lives, statistically they will be broke again within a few years. But that doesn't work in reverse order. You can't just act rich and gain money that way. The first real test of the score was in a juvenile detention center, but the record of what happened there is sealed. The justification is that all the subjects were minors. But one of the known things is that the kids liked being watched by non-biased eyes, since they were under surveillance anyway, and they would talk to the cameras. The couple goes on to say, "We used to be a much closer-knit society until communities got bigger and we began to fetishize privacy." They compare the score to SATs, saying parents were okay with their kids being scored that way, and the score is better because you can't game it. The software learns from the attempts to game it, and it becomes better and smarter. Look, one of the problems with standardized tests, one of them, is the push to learn what the tests want, not being tested on what was learned. When I was in school, we had entire lessons on just how to take standardized tests properly, like exercises to fill in a bubble correctly and the exact way to phrase your essays. But the score simply makes the test invisible, so you don't even know what you're being tested on. And from what Nathan and Sherry say, it almost sounds like trying to figure out what the score wants will actually lower your score. I was extra polite this month. Oh, that raised my score. Okay, I'll work on always being polite. The score considers that gaming it, so now it doesn't count being polite. Not that you would really know what you did that either improved or lowered your score. Oh, and the book never addresses this. Imani meets up with Diego after school, who's hanging out in a secluded spot with a bunch of other unscored kids. At this point, Diego is giving Imani butterflies. Imani suggests that Diego write his essay about the philosophy behind the score, the idea of creating a perfect society through technology. Because he is unable to actually hold a real conversation, he just scoffs at that idea and tells her that is code for getting rid of the unscored. The end goal is supposedly have everyone be scored, so in a way, yes. If everyone is scored, then there are no unscored. But he makes it sound like they're going to round up unscored and... I don't know. Diego is full of conspiracies and condescension. Though, in between trading insults to Amani, he whispers in her ear that she is beautiful. The unscored kids and them end up running away from some rangers, since the area they were in was off limits, which Diego claims is unfair, that the government has no right to declare an area off limits. I am in awe of his entitlement. This idea that no one should be allowed to tell him he isn't allowed somewhere, I bet he loses his shit when he sees an employees only sign. And as if I wasn't frustrated enough with him, Diego pulls a just kidding about calling Amani beautiful. He was just messing with her. He also teases her about blushing when he complimented her. Before they leave, one of the unscored girls reminds Diego to not be late to the next Chaos Foundation meeting. When asked what the Chaos Foundation is, Diego just says it can't be explained in words. It's something you have to experience. Diego leaves a note in Imani's locker with the time and location of the Chaos Foundation's next meeting, which she immediately takes to Miss Wheeler with, who praises her and says she will definitely be rewarded for telling her, basically saying her score will be improved from snitching on Diego and that the police will take care of it from there, but to not warn Diego about the police or anything else they have talked about. In Mr. Carroll's class, he talks about the collapse of the middle class and how terrible their current society is. It's less of a discussion or the history of how society ended where it is now, and more of him teaching his opinion. There isn't anything inherently wrong with sharing your opinion as a teacher, but you can't just speculate and declare your opinion as fact, especially without any grounding facts. Of course, Mr. Carroll is right because this is a story, and he gets the students involved with talking about how all this relates to the score. Diego pipes up in defense of the score, saying it gives people a chance at the American dream, to which Imani argues that it's just a caste system. It's hard to tell if Imani is just arguing against the score to be on the opposite side as Diego, or if she is starting to actually have anti-score feelings. At the very least, her outburst gives her an idea for her essay. The next day, Mr. Carroll gives in to the curriculum Nazis and teaches history and things that will be on the end of your test. I'm so sorry you had to do your job instead of soapboxing all day. The next note Diego sneaks her says to come over to his house because his mom's files might have something useful for her essay. His house is a mansion, the smallest mansion in his neighborhood, but still a mansion. Diego reads off a bit of an interview from Sherry that basically says that kids ended up forming cliques based on their scores and that was an unintended consequence. I'm sorry. Two geniuses working together and giving a rating system to teenagers didn't realize that people would group up. They gave people scores, but then having people seeking out similar scored people to be with blindsided them. Diego sneaks in mentioning another book, Brave New World, that he read that Imani obviously has never even heard of, much less read. It, of course, used to be required reading. Again, not in any of my classes. Diego and Imani go back and forth about ideas for their essays. According to Sherry, kids grouping up as their score actually inhibits the ability to raise ranks. Not sure how. They never say what kind of change would allow your score to raise. Is it simply making friends like normal? Or do low-scored kids need to hang out with high-score kids? There are no actual answers, just vague, aren't cliques wrong vibes. Imani argues that the score actually makes people more individualized and not form bonds or groups that can rise up together. That in the past, women bonded together to get rights since they were all a lower caste. But if a woman had the chance to simply become a man if she worked hard enough, women would trample each other instead of helping each other out. No. Look, without derailing this, let me just say, there have always been people who have said, if you work hard enough, you'll get a better life. This idea ignores the possibility of empathy, and also some women did pretend to be men. But Diego is extremely impressed by her and suggests that they collaborate on the essay, which defeats the purpose of the essay. Imani's argument is the scholarship is for a single individual, but Diego tells her it's okay. He planned on giving her the money from the start if he won. Not how that works. Imani takes offense at the idea of taking money from him. Diego gets himself a beer and offers one to Imani, trying to convince her to collaborate, even saying his mom could get their paper published somewhere because of the connections both of his parents have. This sets Imani off. She yells at him about how she doesn't want his family's connections or his charity. His response? Asking her why she needs to hate him so much. Way to miss the point. Diego is able to buy his way out of the point race and looks down on every single person who is just trying to survive in this unfair game. All the time acting like they could opt out like him if they wanted, when the point of the score, as flawed as it is to give poor kids a chance. Wow, in a way Diego is right. The score system is to get rid of people like him. People who get everything and don't have to worry because mommy and daddy have the money and connections to get him set in life. Amani leaves, and some stuff that I've been glossing over becomes more plot relevant. Katie and the unscored boy Parker have been openly dating at this point. And when they sneak out to a field to have sex, some students with a telephoto lens are able to get a video of them doing the deed. The next day at school, everyone is either watching the footage or gossiping with those who have seen it, and still images from the video litter the hallway floors. Apparently, this isn't the first time amateur porn had come from the students of their high school. But this time it was extra scandalous because before Katie had gotten involved with Parker, she had been a high scored, and it was serving as a cautionary tale for not getting involved with unscored. It was never outright stated how old Katie and Parker are, so let's just pretend they are barely 18. It is her senior year of high school, it's possible, but you can't just film two people doing that without their knowledge and upload it to the internet. Why are the police not involved with this? The book treats this event like it's no one's business, and that's why it's wrong. Oh, and Katie and Parker are expelled for being filmed. To be fair, Imani does go to Miss Wheeler asking her how she could expel them since she is pretty sure it's not legal to do so. Miss Wheeler's response is that she doesn't care. That's for the lawyers to decide. In fact, Diego's mom is their lawyer. Miss Wheeler tells Imani off a little, saying defending her old friend won't improve her score. In fact, she is excited about this whole thing because she intends to have Diego arrested during the press event the next day. Miss Wheeler doesn't even care if the arrest sticks. It's all for show and to drag his lawyer's mom name through the mud. Miss Wheeler shoos Imani off since she has gotten what little use she could out of her. That night at home, Imani skips dinner and just sits alone in her room doing her Spanish homework. Her dad comes into her room with some bread and butter, asking her about the press event and if he should be there. Imani tells him it doesn't matter if he's there or not, and should just go to her brother's sport thing instead. To which her father scolds her for not caring even though the press event concerns her best friend, and that she won't talk to him about anything. So she does tell him how she feels, that her best friend threw her life away and dragged her down too, and that the meeting doesn't matter because it's all for show anyway. But sure, let's pretend what she wants matters and that everything can be worked out with common sense. To which her father responds how a lot of parents do when they ask their kids to open up to them, get mad at their tone and say they aren't allowed to talk to their parents that way. To which Imani says fine and stops talking. Her father snaps at her that I did not say we were finished. When Imani still doesn't say anything, he becomes sad and loudly complains, family don't mean nothing anymore, and then goes downstairs to argue and yell with his wife. What did the dad want? Granted, the tone and words Imani used weren't the best, but in this situation, I'm more on her side. She had been under a lot of stress, and as far as we know, it is Katie's fault Imani's score dropped so low. So her frustration is understandable, and she was honest with her dad. The meeting is just a facade for Miss Wheeler to push her agenda. Instead of trying to sleep to the sounds of her parents arguing, Imani sneaks out and calls Katie, trying to get a hold of Diego. Parker ends up having Diego's number, but Diego doesn't answer. Imani then asks Katie for a ride, to which Katie asks, what have you done? Imani unloads, telling Katie everything, and Katie says she can't believe Imani did that, and promptly hangs up on her. Imani immediately regrets telling Katie and tells herself she should have believed in the score, and this final action has probably doomed her. Katie then shows up with her scooter, and it turns out her phone had just died at the most dramatic moment possible. They make it to the location of the Chaos Foundation meeting, which is a pub packed with college students and a stage. Cops are in the pub standing around looking confused, and a girl on stage makes fun of them, asking if what they are doing is illegal now. Up until this point, I thought Chaos Foundation was a book club, that they were going to actually do something with the fact Diego reads so many books that no one has heard of anymore. Nope, turns out Chaos Foundation is the name of Diego's band, where Diego plays the bass. The words are all nonsense, and the music is described as weird. Imani doesn't really get the music, but she does stare dreamily at Diego, to which Katie calls her out for staring, but also admits Diego is kinda cute. After the music, Imani and Diego talk. She asks him if he was sent as a spy against Miss Wheeler, which he thinks is a super dumb question. Like Miss Wheeler isn't worth the time of day. He tells her he was expelled from his private school for bogus reasons, just saying he has a problem with authority and his parents refused to spend the money on another private school, so he was sent to public school. Turns out he likes the public school better than being surrounded by overprivileged rich kids, but he admits he knows he's a hypocrite, so that makes it okay. Oh, and he doesn't actually like politics, and he has no intention of following his mother's example. He just wants to play in a band, go to college, and see where life takes him. He was only so political in class because he found it funny upsetting other people, especially Imani, since she found her cute when she was upset. He literally says your nose wrinkles in this amazingly cute way when you're upset, and that he loves that about her. There's some hot tension between them for a moment, but Diego tells her he's willing to wait until her final score comes out since he doesn't want to ruin it any further. Imani tells him to have his mother call her in the morning, that it is extremely important, and that she is sorry for what is going to happen tomorrow. Mrs. Landis, Diego's mom, calls early the next morning and Imani tells her all about her relationship with Ms. Wheeler. Mrs. Landis records the conversation because it's easier than taking notes. She also tells Imani that it was a lie that what she was doing would help her score, and that she is glad she eventually told her everything. When Diego doesn't come to class that day, Imani figures his mom told him everything, and he is just so angry with her that he can't stand the sight of her. Imani gets her dad to go to the meeting with her that night, and before the meeting, Miss Landis approaches her and asks if she would be comfortable speaking in front of everyone. Instead, they settle on playing the recorded interview from that morning. Miss Landis calls her brave. Her father is very confused. The meeting turns out to be about how Ms. Wheeler wants to ban all unscored from their school. Ms. Wheeler talks first, mentioning tough choices and that the unscored bring the score down with them. The book cops out and doesn't actually have what Ms. Wheeler says, just a vague feeling. Right before Miss Landis takes the stage, Imani decides she doesn't want to be there for the part with her in it. She spots Diego and chases after him as he leaves. When she catches up with Diego, he asks her what she wants. That it's not that he has forgiven her, but he has chosen to forget, and repeats the question, what does she want? To which she kisses him. He pulls away immediately and gets upset, asking if she is toying with him. She says no and kisses him again. This time he kisses her back. She spies the ScoreCorp camera and smashes it. They can hear the meeting descend into utter chaos. Cheering, booing, and police. Imani and Diego hold hands and kiss again. The end. Told you. I wasn't kidding. There is one more page that is a letter from the scholarship saying both Diego and Imani won, and they can divide the money as they see fit. But that's it. What was Imani's final score? Was the conspiracy real? What were the consequences from that meeting? It doesn't matter. She got a rich boyfriend and her scholarship, so why should she care? I bet the reason we don't find out if her score went up or down is supposed to be symbolic, since in the end she decided she didn't care anymore. So neither should we. But that's kinda crappy writing. The funny thing is, I'm not completely against the idea of a story that just takes place in a dystopia, of people just living and dealing with life. The main character doesn't have to topple the evil regime for the story to be good. I'm a sucker for that kind of cathartic ending, but I've read good dystopias where the status quo doesn't change. But to have a story where big chunks of the world building is missing and readers are supposed to use that to justify that the society isn't supposed to work just rubs me the wrong way. Even if the audience never finds out the little details of how the world works, I should at least get the feeling that the author knows, which I didn't here. I can't stand stories that ask questions that the author never intends on answering. In the end, the book never answers the biggest question I had. Can interacting with an unscored ruin your score? It tries to argue that sticking with your same score peer group doesn't matter, but still treats the idea that even talking to an unscore can ruin you. As callous as Ms. Wheeler was, and the fact she was sort of the villain, I could argue that she was doing what the score told her was the best. She was a 98 when she graduated, after all, and if unscored are that dangerous, yeah, not allowing them at your school makes sense. And her attitude also makes sense. If she was nearly perfect, then her opinions are the best path to a good score. Plus, the unscored are just kids that never got the permission slip signed, not a minority group that is discriminated against. The book never actually answers the idea of the score being fair or not, or what you're graded on. It doesn't help I didn't care for the characters. Imani keeps flip-flopping what she thinks, and not in a wool falling from my eyes kind of way, but more of a I'll do what works best right now. We're told she is really smart, but that never manifests in the story. She is just supposedly really good at writing essays. Diego was an arrogant jerk. He was handed everything on a silver platter and wants to act like that makes him so much better than anyone else who is stuck trying to please the score. Oh, and what does he want to do in this dystopian future? What are his goals? He wants to chill, go to college, and play in his band. Not a specific degree, or to get his mom off his back, just college because that's what people are supposed to do. His band isn't even any good. It isn't awful, but it's weird in that super niche kind of way. At least Amani wants to go to college to save the ocean from whatever is killing off all of the clams and stuff. It's not a good romance, and it's not all that good as a dystopia. I finished it hoping that there would be some kind of answer to even half the questions I had, but nope. I can't even delude myself into going, oh, I bet this sequel will answer my questions, because this is a single contained story. That's right, it's not a dystopian trilogy. Shocking. Well, that was the book scored. It's worse than is really not being fleshed out enough, but I've read worse dystopias. I'm Urban Banshee, and I'm gonna go read something else because sometimes reading is fun.